Welcome back, everyone. I'm Halima Sharif, and I'm the host for Anything and Everything, the show which acknowledges humanity at its core and recognizes that everyone has a story. This is our fourth episode, and I'm so honored to welcome another musical legend, the amazing, the oldest living matriarch of New Orleans vocalists, the also lovely Miss Germaine Bazzle. So let me tell you why I just love this woman, why she's amazing, and why you will also see why she's so just all that. Miss Germaine Bazzle was born in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1932. She grew up in a family where everybody played the piano. Her mother, father, aunts, uncles all played. That was the instrument of the day. You could walk down one block and at least 3 families in that block had a piano in their home. Her musical influences include Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, and Billy Eckstine. Miss Bazzle began playing piano by ear and remembers picking up the song, Sweet Sue, Just You, which her father would play. She began her formal training at age 12 when her mother enrolled her in the Xavier Junior School of Music located on the Xavier University campus. That's where she met pianist Ellis Marsalis and bassist Richard Payne, who also encountered a significant influence in her musical life. After graduating from the Xavier University of Louisiana, Ms. Bazzle worked as a teacher, inclusive of choir and music appreciation at Xavier University Preparatory High School, also known as Xavier Prep, what is now called St. Catherine Drexel. After 50 years, she retired from teaching in 2008. Ms. Bazzle is often referred to as one of New Orleans' important jazz vocalists. After graduation from Xavier University, Ms. Bazzle began a teaching career and entertaining in the same year, teaching during the day and playing bass in local traditional jazz band at night. After 12 years as a teacher, she left the classroom for a short time and began singing with various bands in New Orleans. 3 years later, she returned to the classroom, but continued to perform with such jazz greats as Alvin Red Tyler, Peter Chuck Beatty, Victor Boyens, bassist, vocalist, George French, pianist Ellis Marsalis, Emile Vanette, Larry Siebert, Dave Tarkanowski, and many more. Ms. Bazzle can be heard on her CD entitled Standing Ovation. One of the true legends of New Orleans jazz, Germaine Bazzle has been under-recognized nationally and internationally through her entire career. Her voice in jazz is as distinctive as any, with a sweet soul to match. Ms. Bazzle has performed at every New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival since its inception in 1970. She also still performs weekly at the Jazz Playhouse at the Royal Sonesta, and she's currently a vocal music instructor at the Louis Armstrong Summer Jazz Camp. However, due to the pandemic, she hasn't been able to perform at any of the mentioned venues. In 2015, Ms. Bazzle received Offbeat Magazine Lifetime Achievement in Music Education Award. Offbeat also awarded her 2 Best of the Beat Awards, Best Contemporary Jazz Vocalist in 1996 and Best Female Vocalist in 1997. In 1990, 1992, 93, and 94, she received the Big Easy Music Award for Best Female Performer. Ms. Bazzle has always prioritized teaching above touring and recording. She contributes greatly to jazz education for young people. Although she has never performed beyond New Orleans or mid-album, she is admirable, both as an educator and a musician. As mentioned earlier, she is one of the matriarchs of New Orleans vocalists. As a matter of fact, she's an amazing woman. Ms. Bazzle, welcome. I appreciate you being on the show. I think you already know what you mean to me. I just have to bow when I see you because you have had quite an impact on my life.
Bless your heart. Bless your heart. But I'm honored and I feel quite privileged and I'm very proud to be a part of this program. You know, it's like, I feel like a mom, you know, who's very proud of her daughter achieving and doing what you do, doing so well, you know, and it takes a lot to do that, to step out and do, especially what you're doing at the time that you started doing it.
Yes.
You know, so I know it hasn't been an easy road because good things require a lot of work and dedication and commitment and encouragement and all of those things. And to sit here and hear you and remember you when you were sitting in the classroom, and I'm saying, my goodness, how she has grown, you know, and beautifully. and the sincerity that you had there at prep, I still hear it now. So I want to thank you,
Oh, wow.
you
You
know,
know,
for asking me to be a part of this.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you for those kind words. Your wisdom alone has carried me throughout my life personally, throughout my career. You know, I won't even go into that because this is about you. But thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So let me ask you a question that of
Mhm.
course, the number one question of all. How did you get started in the music industry?
In the, that, I don't even know how to answer that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And no, because I don't remember going into a studio to do a recording or anything very early. I think the first recording that was ever done of me was on the Jazz Fest. That was the first time that I was aware of that. But it's not anything that I set out to do. That's just what those, you know, but that's the way they do. They record the things and all that. And as a result of that, I started getting some gigs and all of that kind of stuff with, what's his name? Kalamu. Do
Okay.
you remember
Yes.
Kalamu?
Salam.
Yeah.
Yes.
He had been trying to get me into a studio to do a recording, and I wouldn't do it.
Wow.
Because I wasn't interested in it. But because he contacted me after the Jazz Fest, and you know, he wanted to do a recording, and I want to do that. And I was teaching at prep. And at the end of the school day, this particular day, I walked out of the building and he was outside. And he says, I've come to take you to the studio and we're going to go. He brought me to some studio somewhere and there was Alvin Ray Tyler and James Black, you know. I think Emil was on that set and maybe George. And there I was. So I recorded, you know, but that's the only way he was going to get me there because I wasn't going to volunteer. And that little story sort of spread around town, you know, and this is how the whole recording thing started. But I had been performing before that. Let's see, you mentioned, I started teaching and playing gigs at the same time, the same year. And after about 12 years, as you said, I decided that I didn't want to teach anymore and came back home. And one night standing by a cigarette machine in the bar where there was live entertainment, the band guy who was listening, Buddy Williams, who was in charge of the band at the time. And he came up to me, he says, Germaine, you want a gig? I said, yeah. He said, okay. I said, when? He said, now. So I was hired on the spot. No preparation, had no idea what I was going to do. Fortunately, I worked with musicians who had big ears and were familiar with the songs that I called because I didn't have a program. So we had to do everything, you know, right off the top, no planning, straight ahead. I enjoyed that so much.
Wow.
And that was my first lesson, if you will, in doing jazz on the bandstand with those particular musicians.
What year was
no rehearsals, you know, and I'm saying, do you guys know this song? Or they'll say, well, we don't know it, but what key? And, you know, here's the key and but what tempo, you know, so, because it was on me to set the tempo and the key. But there was no written arrangement. Everything was improvised, you know, and that was the biggest thrill of my life to be able to just do that, you know, with these guys. And it got to the point that I was called to do gigs without any rehearsals.
Amazing.
Germaine, we got a gig and we want to know if you want to do it, and it's paying such and such. Yep, okay, here we go. That's the way that went. And I'm not sure about how it went for other, you know, other vocalists with this, with that in that area, but that's the way it broke down for me. And from that moment on, I started getting more and more gigs in the city with different musicians. I mean, they just call me, you know, and I'd go and do it. No rehearsals. You know, all we had to do was know the key and the tempo, and then we went with it. So that's why sometimes I always tell people the bandstand is a classroom, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, because you learn. And I had heard of the people who had been playing that, but I had never worked with them before, like Nat Paralot, Buddy Williams, Roger Dickerson, Roy Montrell. These are all people that I had heard of, but I had never worked with them before, you know. And it seemed to have just set a pattern for me to get these calls and go on these gigs and have fun.
That's right.
Have fun with that.
So what year was that around? If you
let me see. I'm thinking maybe 60s, mid 60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you started out playing the bass.
Yeah, Well, I started out playing the bass. The band director at the school where I was teaching, I knew him from Xavier University.
Yes.
Because we were in the concert band together, and he played trumpet, and I was a bass player. So he came out to this. We were in Thibodeau working as teachers because he was the band director and I was the choral director. And he asked me, he says, "You still play bass?" I said, "I don't even own a bass." He said, "Well, I can get a bass because we need a bass player."
Wow.
I said, "Okay, all right." I said, "When?" He says, "Tonight." Okay, so their original bass player had died and they were looking for somebody to take his place. So I went on the gig. I said, "Now, I don't know any of these tunes. You have rehearsals or whatever?" "No, we don't have rehearsals." Okay. So we get on the bandstand and they call in tunes and I'm saying to the pianist, you know, I said, "I don't know this tone." He said, "You'll learn it. It's in key." And he give me the key and then they just go off and play, you know. But fortunately, you know, that was another experience, you know, being in the classroom. That was my first experience. The second experience was at Holly's, you know. And I've had some time to reflect on those experiences because there were many gigs that I've done where we had rehearsals. You know, the biggest thing that we would rehearse for was for Jazz Fest.
Yes.
You know, and after that it was, well, you know, bring your changes, bring your lyrics and all of this kind of stuff. But I never had a written arrangement.
Right.
You know, we just had the changes and everybody, you have to have big ears.
That's right. To
hear, you know, what's going on. And I got a lot of inspiration from those guys.
So did you, like the piano, were you self-taught? Did you teach yourself how to play the bass? How did that happen?
Oh, with the piano, well, you know, as a kid, as you said, you know, everybody in the house played, so you running around. So I learned how to play Sweet Sue.
Right.
But with the piano, my mom took me up to Xavier to go into those classes to get formal training. And while I was at the junior school for piano, I ended up being in a voice class, and I ended up learning how to play string bass.
Okay. Okay.
And then when I went into college, I played the bass in the symphonic band, but I also was a piano and major, voice minor, which was all a part of music education. And I got my degree in music education, which went into led me into the classroom.
What would you say, and this is a question to ask an artist, what would you say your favorite instrument between the piano and the bass and your voice?
Well, I don't know. And I'm being very honest because I never thought about any favorite, you know. I liked instrumental music very much. Of course, I enjoy jazz vocalists and all of that. But after a while, I stopped listening to vocalists and just listened to instrumentalists. And I learned a lot from listening to them, you know. And sometimes I learned all the sections. I learned all because that's the way you listened. You learn what the saxophone people are doing and all of this to be able to sing the song all the way through. And that, I hope, gives you an idea of what that was. So the bandstand was definitely a classroom for me.
Classroom. You know, that's the beauty of improvisation. That's, you know, is spiritual, you know, the whole collaboration. You don't need to think about it. Just be and do. And so it just came naturally to you. It was already in you. It was already in all you. So it sort of makes sense. Who would you say, who were some of your teachers and influencers?
In the jazz bit?
Yes.
Oh gosh, I can start back there with the guys with the traditional jazz. James C. Miller and Earl Foster, Joe Harris, Ronald Richard, and I played the bass. So that was a 5-piece group. And then when I started at Howlett's, it was Buddy Williams, Roger Dickerson, Roy Montrell, Nat Paralot, Lawrence Guyton. These are all, well, they're at the top, you know. And oh man, it was. Then what had happened? Okay, then I started working at Mason's with June Gardner, Red Tyler, Eddie Collins, Edward Frank, Chuck Beatty. Who else?
That's history.
You hear what I'm saying? That's why I keep saying it's a classroom.
It really is.
But then I worked with Porgy Jones and Herb Taylor, Jerome Green.
My Lord.
Then who did I work with? Okay, and then I moved to Ellis Marsalis, Victor Goins, who is this? Ellis.
So many.
Yeah, James Black.
Yes.
You know, and then I would do big band things. They used to have big band concerts on Sundays. And that's when I met your dad, because I think he was playing in the big bands with Johnny Fernandez and all of those guys. And that was my education.
That span, when you mention all those greats and, you know, my father, what year were we talking about? 60s, all the
60s, 70s, yeah. In that, 60s, 70s, 80s. It got to the point, Elena, when I would get called for a gig, and I'd go to the gig and to work with certain people, and we'd go on and do the gig a couple of times, and it's the same folks. And then one night when I go to the gig, the pianist is not there, you know. So I said, okay, what's gonna go? And then somebody else comes in. you know, another pianist. So I was constantly in these situations. I might not work with the same people for about 3 weeks because they would get other gigs that were paying more money,
Yes,
you know, and then go to those gigs and send somebody else in their place. So it was constantly learning, and not necessarily changing the tunes that I did, but I had the opportunity to get to the tune from another direction because each person on that bandstand brought their own concepts.
Yes, yes.
You know, none of this is spoken because we don't know what we're going to play. Once we get on the bandstand, we decide upon what we're going to play. So it was, I am very, very blessed to have had that opportunity, you know, to work with those guys. And then they allowed me to have freedom too.
That's right.
You know, and they would challenge you. James Black. James Black, fantastic, fantastic musician, drummer.
Wow.
The first time I worked with him, I was so afraid that he was going to do something because I've heard him do things, you know, and it just take it to a whole nother level. I said, God.
So did you feel intimidated in the beginning?
Did I? Oh, yes. But James Black, yes, indeed. Yeah, I had so much respect for him as a musician and as a person, you know, but I used to hear him play behind other vocalists. And he would be, and he turned the accent around or do something. And I said, oh God, I don't ever want to work with him because I was afraid he would do that to me, you know. Well, he did it to me, but fortunately I was able to roll with it, you know. But that was a
Wow.
wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience for me.
So what did that feel like, you know, with James Black, you know, being the drummer and you being a vocalist and you felt intimidated, you know, when you finally got through that, I guess it prepared you for those future intimidating moments, you know.
Yeah, well, you know,
ready to roll.
Yeah, because sometimes he would turn the accent around,
Uh-huh.
you know, or he'll double the tempo, you know, and you know, you know, this guy, oh my goodness. So you just have to keep going on. I mean, I wasn't going to stop, you know, so it just kind of pushed me.
Yes. Yes.
To create something, yeah, but it worked.
Yes.
You see, and that's why I call the bandstand the classroom. Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to name this show the classroom. You know, this segment.
We I was one night, it was Ellis, Reginald Veal, and James Black.
Yes.
That's the trio I was working with. Can you imagine?
No.
Can you imagine what that was like? Because I didn't have a program, you know.
Goodness gracious.
Well, what's it gonna do? Oh, I don't know. What you think we ought to do? You know. Well, let's try so. Okay, what key? Okay, what's your tempo? Whatever. That was it.
Wow. That must have been serious.
It was.
Yeah.
But I had no idea it was that serious because I was just, whew, you know, I was having fun.
But see, I think that's the beauty of it. I mean, the fact that, you know, you don't think about it. You're really just having fun. Even during those moments of that fear or whatever you want to call it, intimidations or whatever, but you were having fun. You were doing something that you love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Different.
It's a freedom, Helena.
Yes, it
you
is.
know, it's a freedom that That's the only way I can describe it.
Well, it's spiritual, you
Yeah,
know.
there you go.
So
There you go. That's it.
You know,
That's it.
we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. I interviewed Kid Jordan and his daughter Rachel,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about the same thing. You know, he was
Mm-hmm.
talking about melody and harmony,
Yes.
melodics,
Yes.
and that freedom, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the spiritual connection that you get when you're just, you know,
Absolutely.
go there, you know.
Absolutely.
So I get it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I totally get
Mm-hmm.
it. So you mentioned Ellis Marsalis a couple of times, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking you met Mr. Marsalis and Harold Batiste and Alvin Batiste during your childhood years, correct?
I met Ellis because Ellis and I had the same music teacher when we were kids. Okay. And I met Alvin and Harold maybe, yeah, when I can move back to New Orleans after I stopped working in Thibodeau.
Okay.
That's how I met them, you know, on the bandstand and, you know, big band kind of thing. Yeah.
How was it working with them?
Same challenge. Same challenge. As I started really getting into the working with Alvin at the jazz camp.
Okay.
You know, the
Right.
Louis Armstrong Jazz Camp. And he had, well, I guess the word has spread that I was going to be doing the vocal music at the jazz camp. Well, my dear, I want you to know, we went to the first meeting and we were talking and, you know, just getting acquainted. And here comes Alvin Batiste with this portfolio. And he says, look, Germaine, this is the song that I want you to, hey man, wait a minute. This is a song, I got this song, you know, and I think that your students will be able to, but I don't know who my students are. Right. Remember, we start taking students at 10 years old, right. You know. I said, well, they can do that. They can do that. So he gives me about 20 pages of music. And then he has the one for the band, you know. So we're going to sing this song with the band. And that was an experience to do this with Alvin Batiste. Wow. Because the kids did learn it. We did do it with the big band. And I'm thinking, what was the title of the song? I can't think of it now. It was a tribute to Louis Armstrong that he did. But that's, you know, it seems to be that Germaine can do that. Okay, give it to Germaine, she can do that. You know? But that's the experience that I had with Alvin. I played a couple of times with him. You know, in fact, come to think of it, he did do some work with us when we were working in Thibodeau, you know, because he was playing clarinet at the time. And that was a good thing. Wow. When we'd go out to drive from New Orleans to Thibodeau, and we were all in this big car, and Alvin would take his horn out and play his horn, you know, while we're going to the gig. Just warming up, doing little exercises and all of that. And then when the gig was over and we're coming back, Alvin would have his horn and he would play. One night we had a flat on the highway. Oh, Lord. Okay. Everybody gets out the car so the flat can be fixed. And Alvin took out his horn and he played. His
horn. Might as well. And that must be funny.
But it's a good experience, you know. I've had the opportunity, Helena, to work with the best musicians I think that the city of New Orleans has to offer. I really have.
You're so right. You know, Rachel Jordan said something very profound during the interview with her father. And she said, New Orleans has an unbroken culture as music, and the African Americans on the music scene.
Mm-hmm.
And just listening to the names that you mentioned, you know, not just
Mm-hmm.
Albert Baptiste, Harold Baptiste, you know, Ellis Marsalis, you know, James Black. You think about all these musicians, all these,
Mm-hmm.
the fabric, you know,
Yes, exactly.
which leads me to the question of the 50s and 60s, around that time. What
Mm-hmm.
was the music scene like? You mentioned Hollies. You and I
Mm-hmm.
talked about this before, prior to the show, but you mentioned what was the night Dewdrop. I think I want to
Yeah.
talk about Dewdrop. What was the
Mm-hmm.
Dewdrop like, and what was Hollies and what was the other one? Masons
Mace. Yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
perform at times. Who were some of the people that came on the scene?
Well, the Dewdrop was mostly a nightclub, you know, floor show, you know, that kind of entertainment. Would bring in comedians and singers and dancers, you know, and all of that. And that was the place to hang out. You know, that was the place to go. I mean, to go to hear, you know, good music. And the what was the man's name? Panier, who owned the place, and he would bring in big name people, you know. Um, then Holly's was just a nightclub that featured primarily all New Orleans musicians. In
Okay.
fact, that's the Hollies is the first place I went to that started a gig, you know, as at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Oh
you
Lord.
know, because I worked from 3 to 7,
Wow.
you know, that's the way it was. And he wasn't the only one. I mean, that's the way it was, you know, we do, and you could go to one gig, say work from maybe 7 till 11, you know,
Mm-hmm.
get a break and then go on the other gig, you know, and then you had the 3 to 7 gig,
So who?
walking up and down the street.
3 to 7. Who were some of the people that you met that were coming in? Well, you mentioned New Orleans musicians were for Hollies, but what about the other, like the Dewdrop?
Okay, I can't remember very many of them because I wasn't hanging out at there.
Okay.
And I was in college at the time.
Okay.
So I wasn't hanging too much. But I do the Dewdrop had the floor show and the
Mm-hmm.
comedians and that kind of thing. All this was, what was the other?
Masons.
Masons. Masons is the one that was on South Claiborne. And our set started at 10 o'clock. So we worked from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., 10 to 2, you know. And had a nice crowd all of the time, but this is where primarily the New Orleanians were hanging out. And I'm talking about Red and, you know, all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
But many times you would have some of the people who were working at the Roosevelt Hotel, you know, they'd come in, Ella Fitzgerald and I can't think of
Billy Eckstine would come through there.
all there, and they would work at the hotel. Well, fortunately, or unfortunately for how you look at it, when they would get off their gig at the hotel, they would come up to Mason's.
Mm.
And I had a chance to meet some people, you know, but they'd come in just to hang out, you know. And who else we did? Yeah, okay. And then I started working with George French,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and Bob French.
Yes, I remember them.
Yeah. And while we played many of the things that I did with the other guys, it had a whole nother concept because those guys had a different concept, you know, but we were still able to make it work. They still gave me the freedom that I needed to do what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So it was George, and I worked with George. I worked with Bob French. I worked with Bob's son. Gerald. God, not Bob. George's son, Gerald.
Right.
Who else? Fred LONZO.
Oh, Fred LONZO. I haven't heard that name. I used to hear that name all the time.
Yeah. Trumpet. Wendell Brunius.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think I did a couple of things with your dad with that set too.
Yeah.
You know, Snookum Russell, Joe. Have you ever heard of those guys?
Yeah, you know, I remember all this. I remember years ago.
The Humphreys, you know.
Yeah, I remember. I can't help the family members. So
yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's you know, it just brings back so many memories, and you think about that the culture of New Orleans, growing up in New Orleans for you, being on the music scene. What were some of your most fondest musical moments, like a transcending moment, if you would say?
I think, well, one of them, I don't know if this was the first Jazz Fest or the second, but the first Jazz Fest that I worked with was with Porgy Jones, Herb Taylor, I think it was Jerome Green and Roger Dickerson. And we worked at the auditorium because that's where they had it instead of the fairgrounds. You know? And that was a very special moment for me because I had never even been to the auditorium, let alone be a part of Jazz Fest at the auditorium. That was a big thing for me. I hope I'm answering your question.
Oh, you are.
There's so many. Because there's so many things, you know, coming across now that I'm talking about it. And what else? Yeah. Okay, let me say this to you because I didn't mention this, but I also sang with the St. Louis Cathedral Choir.
Yes.
Okay, which exposed me to, I had a chance to sing a lot of Bach, you know, and Haydn and Gregorian chant.
That's beautiful.
And what did we do? Yeah. And we traveled, you know, we went to Europe and all of this kind of thing.
That must have been a defining moment.
It really, you know, and to have the opportunity to do all of these different genres in the same time frame. You know, it wasn't like you did this and you stopped. You did this and you stopped. I was doing rehearsal on Wednesday night because we had to sing for Mass on Sunday. I was doing gigs on Thursday night. I was doing gigs on Friday night, you know, and then I was teaching every day. So my whole life has been music.
Yes.
And I've had the exposure to various forms, musical forms or types, if you will, or classifications, you know, and there comes a time when all of that stuff comes together. It all comes together. All of those experiences add up to what happens in the next song that I sing. Does that make sense?
It does. It's like you're telling a story, frame by frame.
Yes.
Cliff by cliff, you know. Yes, your journey. And I guess that must be for you and other musicians as well, especially when
yes,
especially when it comes to jazz. You know, I knew you before I knew you because my and I say that in a sense before I met you. Because my father would mention all these names. I never knew who these people were. I'd be like, okay, Red Tyler, Quincy Jones, who are these people? I don't know. They're just somebody my daddy talking about. But I heard your name often, and then I ended up at Xavier Prep High School. And started playing the piano by ear, and then I know Roger Dickerson taught me.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to prep, and I tell you, you pretty much did it for me. I almost wanted to play the piano for good. Then I
Really?
said, no, that's just too many darn recitals and too much practicing and too much
Mm-hmm.
competition with my brother and everybody. I let them do it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you, you left a lasting impact on me. I may not play the piano now, but you know, it's helped me throughout my
Yeah.
life.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and I remember one time I was in the classroom, and you had an article on the billboard of my
Mm-hmm.
father.
Mm-hmm.
It says longing for bebop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know you mentioned you met my father back when, I don't even remember, but what was that like when you met him? When did you meet him? If you know, it was during the big
I,
times.
yeah, when I came back from, when I started working in Thibodeau and they were doing these big band things, Johnny
Mhm.
Fernandez and all, they'd have a certain, it wasn't every Sunday, but there was a Sunday evening concert that we would do at the Longshoremen's Hall on South Claiborne,
Okay,
you know,
okay, yeah.
and we do big band uh, concerts there. And that's when I met your father, like I said, because he was in the trumpet section, you
Yeah.
know. And then he was friends with Red and all those guys,
Mhm.
So I met him like that, And we talk every now and then, but
Mhm.
it was mostly business,
Yeah, of course. He was always business.
Yeah, yeah. But I've had the opportunity to meet them or work with them. Um, and those people, all of those people that I've mentioned
Mhm.
have been my teachers.
Wow. It's a
Yeah.
classroom, like you said. It's a
Hmm.
classroom. You know, you've said this to me before. You've said it many times in previous interviews that you're an educator first,
Yes.
and you are. You know, I mean, when as I'm speaking to you, I'm reminiscing. Um, Ms. Bazzle, the educator, the teacher, the nurturer.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
What
Yes.
share,
That.
share that journey with me. You know, you were at prep for 50 years. That's a blessing. You know,
Hmm.
what you retired in 2008. I
Yeah.
graduated from prep in 1986. Um,
Yeah.
so what was that like?
Well, I tell you what, I started teaching in Thibodeau.
Okay.
Okay. And and this was during the movement, late 50s for me and up
Hmm.
into the 60s. But I started, the same year I started teaching is the same year I started playing the bass in the group.
Okay.
Um, and that went on for about 12 years, as I said, and I didn't want to do it anymore. Then I started doing the gigs, and one of my friends told me, "Did you know Martha Francis?" It's Martha Francis.
Over
She was
at
a music teacher at McMain.
the name sounds familiar, but I know a lot of the Francis. The,
Okay,
I
okay.
know because we had a Francis at Xavier Prep, Miss
Yeah,
yeah. So
Juanita, Juanita
were
Francis.
they all related?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Martha was a friend that we went to the same junior school,
Hmm.
and she said that World Lines was looking for a piano teacher.
Okay.
And so I
Hmm.
started teaching piano uh, at World Lines.
Oh, wow.
Then she says to me, Xavier Prep is looking for a vocal music teacher. Why don't you go on and apply? I said, okay. So I went and I applied, but I was very fair with
Hmm.
the principal. I said, you need to know that I work in nightclubs.
Yes.
She
Yes.
said, that's not a problem. So that's when I started working at Prep I started with chorus
Okay.
and had 2 classes with chorus because I only worked 2 periods a day. And later on, I decided I wanted to buy a car,
Hmm.
and I spoke to the principal because I needed to work to buy a car.
Exactly.
And I mentioned it to him, and he said, well, let me think about it. And he thought about it. And maybe a week later, he says, you thought about what you wanted to do. You wanted to work full time. So what do you think about being principal? I said, oh, no.
Oh, goodness, that's funny.
Thank you very much, but I don't want to be principal. I want to teach,
Yes.
you know. He said, well, let me think about it. So finally, it worked out that he was going to transfer or was going into another position. So he talked to one of the nuns.
Mm-hmm.
She was a chemistry teacher, Sister Lorraine. Do you remember Sister Lorraine?
I think I do remember Sister Lorraine. Yeah, I do. I do remember Sister Lorraine.
Okay, well, Sister Lorraine decided that she would be, you know, she would go along with it. So we were co-principals.
Okay.
You know, and the stipulation was I would be a co-principal if I was allowed to teach my class.
Okay.
And she had the same thing. She would be co-principal if she was allowed to teach her class because she was a chemistry teacher. Okay. So that's the way that worked out.
So you were co-principal and able to still teach.
Right.
So how long were you co-principal for at Prep?
A year.
Okay.
Yeah, a year. Yeah.
And that was during the time you were teaching chorus, and then you moved on to.
Yeah, because I was teaching chorus and, you know, doing the co-principal thing, because that's what they had originally hired me for. Yes. But I went to them with a proposition. I asked if they ever thought about having piano classes. And they said yes. So I talked to the administrators and all of that, and we bought the pianos for the class. And I had 6 students because I had 6 pianos. And we had that class, and they finally decided to put me across the street because, you know, and that's where we had the piano lab and the choral classes. So that was the thing for me. And I was very, very happy to be able to do that because I thought that the ladies at Xavier Prep, you know, should have the exposure. Yes. And that's all it was, you know, to give the ladies the exposure and the opportunity to learn how to play music, sing, you know, and that was it.
It was a wonderful experience, you know. You started Xavier Prep in 1958?
Probably, yeah.
Wow, that's a long time. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. When you think about some of your students at Prep, what students, do you know any students who have actually gone on to pursue their career in music? Or is
no, I know one who went on and went into, and she's in New Orleans now, because she's gone into the classical music, you know. I don't know if you know Giovanna Joseph, if you've ever heard of her.
I do know the name. I don't think we've ever met each other, but I know the name.
Okay, well, she was in my first class when I started teaching at Prep. And we've had some other students who've gone on, they've gone on to college and majored in music, and have done pretty well as far as I know. But it's a wonderful thing. That to me, teaching is, there are no words to describe it.
Yes.
Because you're working with a child, I'm saying this, but you're working with a child's spirit. That's the way, you know, and I think teaching is that.
Yes, it is.
You know, I mean, you're teaching facts and all of this kind of stuff, but the bottom line is that you are you're working with a little person's soul.
Hmm. Wow.
And that's the way I've seen it. So though, and that's the thing that kept me going, you know, there's something else. And now this child may not ever play music or may not, you know, get into singing, but now they have a way of expressing. They've learned, you know, that there are different ways of expressing oneself.
I agree.
And go ahead.
No. I mean, I agree what you're saying. I mean, just considering that I took piano lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I was exposed to music my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
I may not be a musician, but I'm an artist in the essence of it.
Yes, yes.
We all are artists, whether you're
Yes,
an engineer,
absolutely.
doctor, lawyer.
Absolutely.
But it's taught me about freedom and enhancement of freedom.
Absolutely.
It's taught me how to ad lib.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's taught me how to improvise
Mm-hmm.
and be creative. I think the number one
Mm-hmm.
word is being creative.
Yes.
And that's what it does for you. So when you mention that, you know, you're teaching a little child's soul,
Mm-hmm.
that soul lives on forever, and music lives on forever. So it's a blessing. It's a beautiful thing, no matter whether they go into that career or not.
Right.
You are part of that nurturing
Yeah.
that spirit, that soul.
Yes. You know that people often, I've heard it so many times, you know, oh, Basil, what you working with that child for? She can't sing. He can't sing. I said, but yes, they can.
Yeah.
You know, if you can make a musical sound, you can sing.
Hmm.
I mean, it's as simple as that.
That's right.
You know? And it's just sometimes you have to convince the students that they can do it, because you know you have people say, "Oh, why don't you shut up? You can't. You know you can't sing it." That crushes a person.
Yes, it does.
You know? And then you turn around and say, "I think you can do it." Yeah. I don't know if I had this on my board in the classroom, but I had a board that said, "Yes, I can."
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I can. And you just pick out certain words. Yes, I can think.
Yeah.
Yes, I can read. Yes, I can sing. Yes, I can respect others. Yes, I can. And that was on my board for the longest time.
Wow.
Because my thing was to always allow or try to make space for a student to discover him or herself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to tell you anything, you know, but if we work through this music, you know, if we work through this music and you are singing it or you're playing it, and I tell you, close your eyes and sing, you're going to experience something totally different than what I'm talking about.
I agree.
You know, because then it becomes personal.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. With that said, you know, what advice would you give young artists? But you know what? Not just young artists, but what would you give young adults moving into their careers, whether it's music, whether it's an engineer, doctor? What kind of advice would you give them moving on?
Well, the first thing I would say is be honest.
Yes.
Be honest. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with other people. You know, I'm not. Just be honest. Be you. You know, because I think that whatever the talents are that we are given, that is a special way for us to be who we are.
Yes.
And it helps us to be sensitive to others.
Correct.
So that's the first thing I say. Be honest. And the second thing I say is listen.
Two powerful words.
They are. You know,
Do you, what do you miss? I mean, I know when you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, you know, you said that, you know, you haven't been performing because of the pandemic and all. But what do you miss? Do you miss the teaching? You miss the interaction? You know, what are you finding yourself doing these days? No.
I miss the teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, I miss the gigs, you know, but I miss the teaching. I miss sharing all of this beautiful stuff that we have within us. You know, and with music or through music, we can be the greatest communicators in the world.
That's right.
And not say a word.
Yes.
You know, I mean, when we're playing, I mean, all these instrumental things, every song tells a story. It's up to the listener what story is being told.
Yes.
But it's also the responsibility of the performer to be honest in telling the story.
That's true. Those are some words to live by. Lots of wisdom. You've always shared a lot of wisdom with not just with me, but with your students. And Ms. Bazzle, I have to ask you, what do you do to look so young? You are 88 years young.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I mean, I just, this is a blessing.
Oh my goodness.
You still, I graduated from prep in 1986. That was over 30 years ago. 40, I don't even know how many years ago that was, but Lord, you look amazing.
Thank you, Dawn.
That's a blessing, you know.
It is. Absolutely.
You have a beautiful spirit. You have a serene spirit. You know, you use the word free quite often. You are. You know, you're free within yourself. How do you do it?
Well, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be able to enjoy what I do.
Yes.
I enjoy teaching. I enjoy gigging. You know, I enjoy second lining. You know,
Yes.
all of this stuff. Because it's a language. It's a language that we all speak.
That's right.
You know, and it's, you know, it's just a joy to be able to have the freedom, to realize the freedom that comes. You know, what is this? Music. I'm trying to think of this. Music is a language that cannot be expressed. You know, I think there's something out there. Because you can say so much through music that you could not necessarily verbalize, you know, do verbally. You know, it's just like a look, you know, that sometimes if you're doing something and your mom gives you a look, and I mean, just that look.
Yes.
You know, you do that with your son and all of that. I mean, we all do that. We give somebody a certain kind of look, and they already know whether they should say something or not.
Right, we do.
You know? So, and music does that same kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it talks to the inner self, if that makes sense.
It does. It awakens that stuff inside.
Yeah.
It awakens the spirit with that,
Yeah.
You know, and I think that brings everyone together, regardless of the genre.
Right.
You know, it helps us all, which is why I started the show, Anything and Everything, because everyone has a story. And it also helps us to connect our common humanity.
Right.
So music does that. I think it's a blessing. Do you have any parting words, any more words of wisdom? Because I've got several sound bites here that I'm just gonna use them throughout, because
Mm-hmm.
you've left us with some really positive words, piercing, thought provoking. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have anything else you want to share?
Well, one of the things that I'd like to say is sometimes we have to remember who we're talking to.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We have to remember not just physically, you know, who we're talking to, but every word that we speak has a beat.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that beat is in your heart.
Oh,
And that feeling that you have, you know, the we can't always say it verbally, but we can say it through music,
mm-hmm.
because music is a language, uh, has that beat,
That's right.
you know, and it has a melody. You know, and if we listen and we listen, and then we start getting ideas, and it's instrumental music does the same thing. You know, vocal music does the same thing. One has lyrics and one doesn't, you know, but that beat is there, you know, and as we listen, if we let ourselves really listen with open ears and open heart, you know, then we discover something about ourselves, that we're really pretty good people, you
That's
know.
right.
We discover that, oh, there's something to me, there's more to me than what I see. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Because the real me is within.
Hmm.
Okay? And the only way I can let out what is within is through sound, through music or words. And that's what I try to share with my students. And when I was teaching, you know, with chorus or piano or music, history or whatever,
Hmm.
listen to the sound and just be honest with it. You know, just be honest.
Wow, that's a pack in one. It's a power pack in one. As I'm listening to you, I'm hearing music has no color, has no race. Music just is, and it just connects.
Yeah, right. It does.
It's beautiful.
It does.
Ms. Bazzle, I want to thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. It's been a blessing. I appreciate your contributions. I appreciate your everlasting contributions, um, of what you mean to New Orleans, what you mean to Xavier Prep, what you mean to humanity, just in general. But thank you so much for everything.
Well, I want to thank you, my dear, for even thinking about me and thinking that I am, you know, worthy of being a part of this, because um, there's just so much that if we take the time to listen,
Yes.
if we take the time to listen, you know, find a find a spot where you can be quiet for a little while and just listen.
Yes, I agree.
And you might say, well, I don't hear anything. Yes, you do.
Hmm.
Mm. Yes, you do. You do hear something.
That's right.
Mm.
I agree. Amen to that. Well, thank you. Thank you. I love you, Ms. Bazzle. Looking forward to seeing you in the future soon, hopefully sooner than later. Beyond all this stuff, and I'm looking forward to coming to see you in New Orleans.
Oh, darling, thank you so much. Okay. No, I'm just, doggone, here I am doing this. That's what I'm thinking to myself, because this is not anything that I've ever envisioned,
Yes.
Myself doing, and here I am.
Yeah.
Doing this.
You never know where life takes you,
True.
Like you just said, that the band stage is a classroom. Well, I feel like I'm in a classroom right now. I'm in a classroom with you all over again. Just a little older. That's it. And a little older, a little wiser, and I learned from the best, you.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you and what you contribute to that fabric. So,
well, thank you, darling. Because you have to learn something every day. You don't have to learn something every day. It comes at you every day. Yes. You can decide whether you want to take it or leave it. But we learn something every day.
Awesome. Well, until next time, everyone. This is Anything and Everything, and we just interviewed the wonderful Miss Germaine Bazzle. Until next time, see you then.
Thank you.
Interesting historical moment. During the 1940s at the Junior School of Music, one of the instructors, Sister Letitia, selected Germaine Bazzle, Genevieve Bowles, my cousins Dion and Gloria Humphrey, to play the bass and to perform with the orchestra. This was an important time for the school, as there weren't too many Black girls playing the bass during that time. Germaine ended up being the only one to continue playing bass, while the other ladies went on to play the piano. And of course today, Germaine's main forte is voice. That was indeed one of those wow moments for Black women in New Orleans music history. When